There's a difference between being cold and being untouchable. One shuts people out, the other lets them in without letting them break you. You know that feeling when someone says something mean to you, and normally it would ruin your whole day. Now imagine it just doesn't. Not because you've stopped caring about people, but because you've become so secure in yourself that their opinion simply doesn't control how you feel. Rejection doesn't send you spiraling anymore. Criticism doesn't make you question everything about yourself. Drama happens around you, but it doesn't pull you in. This isn't about becoming emotionally numb. It's not about building walls or shutting down your heart. It's about something far more powerful, becoming so comfortable with who you are that nothing external can shake your foundation. Most people spend their entire lives riding an emotional roller coaster, controlled by everyone else. They wake up happy and go to bed devastated because someone said the wrong thing. They feel confident until someone disapproves. They're at peace until someone creates drama. Their emotional state is completely dependent on how other people treat them. But what if I told you there's another way to experience life? A way where your peace belongs to you and you alone. Where other people's chaos doesn't automatically become your chaos. Where you can love deeply, care genuinely, and engage fully without losing yourself in the process. What if you could become emotionally untouchable? This isn't some fantasy or some cold, detached way of being. This is about mastering something that most people never even know is possible: complete emotional independence. And the path to get there is simpler than you think, but it requires you to understand something about yourself that you've probably never been taught. So if you're tired of having your mood determined by other people's behavior, if you're exhausted from taking everything so personally, if you're ready to finally take control of your inner world, then what you're about to learn could change everything. Are you ready to discover what it means to be truly untouchable? Let me ask you something. How many times a day does someone else's mood determine yours? Think about it. You wake up feeling good, and then someone sends you a passive-aggressive text. Your mood shifts, you're having a decent day, and then a coworker makes a snide comment. Your confidence drops, you're feeling positive, and then someone gives you a look that you interpret as judgment. Your self-esteem wavers. By the end of the day, you're emotionally drained. Not from your own life, but from constantly reacting to everyone else's moods, absorbing everyone else's negativity, responding to everyone else's opinions about you. This is emotional vulnerability in its most destructive form. It's when your inner world is completely dependent on your outer world, when your peace is hostage to other people's behavior, when your worth fluctuates based on external validation or criticism. Most people accept this as normal. They think being sensitive means being emotionally reactive. They believe that caring deeply means being easily hurt. They assume that if you don't get upset by what others say or do, you must not care at all. But this is where most people get it completely wrong. True emotional strength isn't about not feeling. It's about feeling everything and choosing what affects you. There's a profound difference between someone who feels nothing and someone who feels everything but remains unshaken. The first person has shut down their heart. The second person has mastered their emotional world. The first person is emotionally unavailable. The second person is emotionally untouchable. Carl Jung, one of the most influential psychologists in history and the founder of analytical psychology, understood this distinction deeply. He realized that emotional resilience doesn't come from avoiding pain or building walls. It comes from something he called becoming individuated. In simple terms, it means becoming so complete within yourself that you don't need external validation to feel whole, and external criticism can't make you feel broken. But Jung also discovered something else. Most people are emotionally vulnerable because they're looking for something outside themselves that can only be found within. They're seeking approval because they don't approve of themselves. They're devastated by rejection because they've already rejected parts of themselves. They're hurt by criticism because they secretly believe it might be true. They're shaken by other people's anger because they haven't made peace with their own emotions. Every emotional wound that someone else can inflict on you is pointing to a wound that already exists inside you. This is why the same comment that destroys one person doesn't even register with another. This is why some people can handle massive amounts of criticism and rejection, while others crumble at the slightest disapproval. It's not about sensitivity levels, it's about internal wholeness. When you're whole within yourself, when you've done the work of accepting and integrating all parts of who you are, there are no weak spots for external negativity to target. When you genuinely like yourself, other people's dislike feels irrelevant. When you know your worth, other people's opinions of your value become just that, opinions. This is the foundation of emotional untouchability, becoming so solid within yourself that nothing external can destabilize you. But here's what most people don't understand about becoming emotionally untouchable. It's not about building armor. It's about removing the target. When you're emotionally vulnerable, you're essentially walking around advertising exactly where it hurts to hit you. Your insecurities are visible, your triggers are obvious, your wounds are exposed, and unfortunately some people, whether consciously or unconsciously, aim for those vulnerable spots. But when you become emotionally untouchable, something remarkable happens. The target disappears, not because you've become cold or unfeeling, but because you've healed the wounds that made you vulnerable in the first place. Let me give you an example. Think about someone who's deeply insecure about their intelligence. When someone calls them stupid, it devastates them. Not because the words themselves have power, but because those words confirm their worst fear about themselves. The external attack connects with an internal wound. Now think about someone who genuinely knows they're intelligent, who's comfortable with their intellectual abilities and limitations. When someone calls them stupid, what happens? Nothing. The words have nowhere to land because there's no corresponding insecurity inside them. The attack fails because the target doesn't exist. This is the secret. Emotional untouchability isn't about defending against attacks. It's about removing what makes you attackable. And how do you remove what makes you attackable? By making peace with everything you are. This means accepting your flaws instead of hiding them. It means owning your mistakes instead of being ashamed of them. It means embracing your quirks instead of trying to change them. It means loving your imperfections instead of believing they make you unlovable. When you truly accept yourself, all of yourself, there's nothing left for others to use against you. When someone points out your flaws, you can say, "Yeah, I know. And I'm okay with that." When someone tries to shame you for your past, you can respond with, "That's part of my story, and I've made peace with it." When someone attempts to make you feel inadequate, you can remain unmoved because you're not trying to be adequate for them. You're already enough for yourself. This is what Jung meant by individuation, becoming so complete within yourself that you don't need anything external to feel whole. But this process isn't just about self-acceptance. It's also about understanding something crucial about human behavior. Most people's treatment of you has nothing to do with you. When someone is cruel, they're usually acting out their own pain. When someone is critical, they're often projecting their own insecurities. When someone tries to make you feel small, it's typically because they feel small themselves. When someone attempts to control you, it's usually because they feel out of control in their own life. Understanding this doesn't excuse bad behavior, but it does free you from taking it personally. When you realize that how people treat you is a reflection of their internal world, not yours, their actions lose their power to hurt you. This is another crucial component of emotional untouchability, separating other people's emotions from your own. You see, most emotionally vulnerable people are like emotional sponges. They absorb everything around them. They walk into a room and immediately pick up on everyone's tension. They can't tell the difference between their anxiety and someone else's stress. They take on other people's problems as if they were their own. But emotionally untouchable people have learned to maintain what I call emotional boundaries. They can sense what others are feeling without absorbing it. They can empathize without becoming overwhelmed. They can care without carrying. This is perhaps the most practical skill you can develop, learning to feel what's yours and releasing what isn't. So how do you actually become emotionally untouchable? How do you develop this level of emotional independence? How do you stop being at the mercy of other people's words, actions, and moods? It starts with understanding that your emotional reactions are always about you, never about them. This might be hard to hear, but it's also incredibly liberating. No one can make you feel anything. They can trigger emotions that already exist within you, but they cannot create emotions that aren't already there. When someone's words hurt you, it's not because their words have inherent power. It's because those words activated something inside you that was already sensitive. This doesn't mean you're to blame for feeling hurt. It means you have the power to heal what makes you vulnerable to that hurt in the first place. Let's say someone calls you selfish and it devastates you. The devastation isn't coming from the word selfish, it's coming from your fear that maybe they're right, maybe you are selfish, maybe you're not as good a person as you thought. The external trigger connected with an internal doubt. But if you genuinely know you're not selfish, if you've examined your motivations and actions and feel confident about your character, that same accusation would feel absurd rather than devastating. The word would have nowhere to land because there's no corresponding insecurity inside you. This is why emotional healing is the foundation of emotional untouchability. You have to identify your emotional weak spots, the places where you doubt yourself, reject yourself, or haven't forgiven yourself, and do the work of healing them. Not because you're broken, but because those unhealed places are where you remain vulnerable. But healing alone isn't enough. You also need to learn something equally important, separating your identity from your circumstances. Most people's sense of self fluctuates based on what's happening around them. If things are going well, they feel good about themselves. If they face criticism or rejection, they feel bad about themselves. Their identity is completely tangled up with their current situation. Emotionally untouchable people understand that who they are is separate from what happens to them. They might feel disappointed about a rejection, but they don't feel diminished by it. They might feel sad about a loss, but they don't feel broken by it. They might feel frustrated about a setback, but they don't feel like failures because of it. Your worth is not determined by external validation. Your value is not dependent on other people's approval. Your identity is not defined by your current circumstances. When you truly understand this, criticism becomes just information, rejection becomes just redirection, drama becomes just noise that you can choose to tune out. There's another crucial skill that emotionally untouchable people master: the art of response versus reaction. Think about the last time someone really got under your skin. What happened? Most likely they said or did something and you immediately responded from that triggered place, maybe with anger, defensiveness, or emotional collapse. There was no pause, no choice, just automatic reaction. But emotionally untouchable people have learned to create space between trigger and response. They feel the initial emotional impulse, but they don't immediately act on it. They pause, they breathe, they choose. This pause, this moment of conscious choice, is where your power lives. In that space, you get to decide, is this worth my peace? Is this person's opinion relevant to my life? Is this drama something I want to engage with? Most of the time, the answer is no. And when you can consistently choose not to engage with what doesn't serve you, you become incredibly difficult to upset, manipulate, or control. Then there's something that might sound contradictory: learning to care deeply without caring desperately. Most people think they have to choose, either care too much and get hurt constantly, or care too little and become cold and disconnected. But there's a third option: caring from a place of strength rather than neediness. And when you care from strength, you love people without needing them to love you back in a specific way. You give without expecting specific returns. You open your heart without making your happiness dependent on how others respond. This is mature love. This is healthy caring. This is what it means to be emotionally untouchable, not because you don't feel, but because your feelings don't control you. Finally, perhaps most importantly, you need to become your own source of validation. Most people are externally validated. They feel good about themselves when others approve, and bad about themselves when others disapprove. They're constantly looking outside themselves for confirmation of their worth, their decisions, their choices. Emotionally untouchable people have developed what I call internal validation systems. They have their own standards, their own values, their own measures of success. They seek input from others, but they don't depend on others for their sense of self-worth. This doesn't mean being arrogant or dismissive of feedback. It means having such a solid sense of who you are that external opinions enhance your self-knowledge rather than determine it. When someone compliments you, you can appreciate it without needing it. When someone criticizes you, you can consider it without being crushed by it. When someone rejects you, you can accept it without rejecting yourself. This is emotional independence, being the ultimate authority on your own worth. Now let me tell you what happens when you become emotionally untouchable, because the transformation goes far beyond just feeling better. It changes everything about how you move through the world. First, your relationships completely transform. When you're no longer emotionally reactive, people can't push your buttons anymore. This means they have to relate to you differently. They can't manipulate you with guilt, control you with anger, or destabilize you with criticism. They have to actually communicate with you rather than trying to manage your emotions. The people who were drawn to your emotional volatility, the drama seekers, the button pushers, the chaos creators, naturally drift away because you're no longer providing the reaction they were seeking. And the people who appreciate emotional stability, the secure, mature, emotionally healthy individuals, are naturally drawn to your calm presence. You stop attracting people who want to fix you and start attracting people who want to enjoy you. Second, your confidence becomes unshakable. When your self-worth isn't dependent on external validation, confidence stops being something you have to build or maintain. It becomes something you simply are. You don't need to prove yourself because you're not trying to convince anyone of anything. You don't need to defend yourself because you're not being attacked. You're just being disagreed with, and that's fine. This kind of confidence is magnetic because it's not based on arrogance or insecurity. It's based on self-acceptance and inner peace. Third, you develop incredible emotional freedom. When you're not constantly managing other people's reactions to you, when you're not walking on eggshells trying to keep everyone happy, when you're not spending mental energy defending yourself against every criticism, you have so much more space for what actually matters to you. You can pursue your goals without being derailed by disapproval. You can make decisions based on your values rather than other people's expectations. You can live authentically instead of performing for an audience. Fourth, you become incredibly attractive to emotionally healthy people. There's something deeply magnetic about someone who can't be emotionally manipulated, someone who remains calm in chaos, someone who doesn't take things personally, someone who can engage fully without losing themselves in the process. Emotionally healthy people are drawn to this presence because it feels safe to them. They know they can be themselves without having to manage your emotions. They can share their thoughts without worrying about setting you off. They can have disagreements without causing emotional devastation. This is the paradox of emotional untouchability. The less you need others emotionally, the more they want to be around you. Finally, you develop what can only be described as emotional mastery. You become someone who feels everything but is controlled by nothing. You can experience the full spectrum of human emotion without being overwhelmed by it. You can love deeply without losing yourself. You can care genuinely without becoming codependent. This isn't about becoming emotionally numb or shutting down your heart. It's about becoming so emotionally intelligent that you can feel everything and choose what to do with those feelings. You can feel angry without becoming destructive. You can feel sad without becoming depressed. You can feel hurt without becoming bitter. You can feel disappointed without becoming hopeless. This is emotional mastery, having access to all your emotions without being enslaved by any of them. The journey to becoming emotionally untouchable isn't always easy, but it's always worth it. It requires you to face parts of yourself you might have been avoiding, to heal wounds you might have been carrying for years, to change patterns you might have thought were just how you are. But here's what I want you to understand. This isn't about changing your personality or becoming someone you're not. It's about becoming more of who you actually are underneath all the emotional reactivity. The emotionally untouchable version of you isn't some foreign person you need to become. It's who you've always been underneath all the conditioning that taught you to seek external validation and fear external criticism. You were born whole. You were born enough. You were born worthy. Everything that happened after that, all the messages that taught you to doubt yourself, all the experiences that made you feel not enough, all the conditioning that made you depend on others for your emotional stability, those were additions to who you really are, not core parts of your identity. Becoming emotionally untouchable is really about removing what doesn't belong and returning to what was always true. You are enough, exactly as you are, regardless of what anyone else thinks about it. This doesn't mean you stop growing or improving. It means you grow and improve from a place of self-love rather than self-rejection, from a place of wholeness rather than inadequacy, from a place of choice rather than compulsion. The most beautiful part of this transformation is that it's not about becoming someone different. It's about remembering who you've always been. When you strip away all the emotional reactivity, all the people-pleasing, all the need for external validation, what's left is the truest version of yourself. And that version of yourself, the one that exists beneath all the noise, is naturally emotionally untouchable. Not because it doesn't feel, but because it feels from a place of such deep self-acceptance that nothing external can disturb its peace. This is your birthright. This is who you really are. And it's time to come home to yourself. So where do you start? How do you begin this journey from emotional vulnerability to emotional untouchability? How do you start building the kind of inner strength that nothing external can shake? Start with awareness. For the next week, pay attention to what triggers your emotional reactions. When do you feel hurt? What kinds of comments get under your skin? What situations make you feel anxious or defensive? Don't judge these reactions. Just notice them. Most people go through life being emotionally reactive without ever understanding what's actually triggering them. But you can't heal what you can't see, and you can't change what you're not aware of. Then, start asking better questions. Instead of asking, "Why did they say that to me?" Start asking, "Why did that affect me so much?" Instead of focusing on what others are doing wrong, start exploring what inside you is responding so strongly. This isn't about blaming yourself for feeling hurt. It's about empowering yourself to heal what makes you vulnerable to that hurt in the first place. Practice the pause. The next time someone says or does something that normally would trigger an immediate emotional reaction, practice pausing. Take a breath. Count to 5. Ask yourself, is this worth my peace? Is this person's opinion relevant to my life? Is this drama I want to engage with? Most of the time, the answer will be no, and every time you choose not to react from a triggered place, you're building your emotional untouchability muscle. Start validating yourself. Instead of seeking approval from others, start giving it to yourself. Instead of waiting for others to recognize your worth, start recognizing it yourself. Instead of depending on external validation to feel good about yourself, start building internal systems of self-worth. This is the most important work you'll ever do, learning to be your own source of love, approval, and validation. And finally, be patient with yourself. Becoming emotionally untouchable is a process, not a destination. You're rewiring patterns that might have been in place for years or decades. You're healing wounds that might run very deep. You're changing ways of being that might feel fundamental to who you are. But every small step matters. Every moment you choose not to react from a triggered place, every time you validate yourself instead of seeking external validation, every instance where you separate your worth from your circumstances, all of this is building toward the emotionally independent person you're becoming. You don't have to be perfect at this, you just have to be committed to it. The goal isn't to never feel hurt or never have emotional reactions. The goal is to feel everything fully while remaining centered in who you are. To let life affect you without letting it control you. To stay open-hearted without being defenseless. This is what it means to be emotionally untouchable. Not because nothing touches you, but because nothing can break you. And once you taste this kind of emotional freedom, once you experience what it's like to move through the world from a place of such inner stability that external chaos can't disturb your peace, you'll never want to go back to being at the mercy of other people's moods, opinions, and actions. You were meant to live from this place of strength. You were meant to be emotionally free, and that journey starts right now with the next choice you make about how to respond to whatever life brings your way. The emotionally untouchable version of yourself is waiting. It's time to meet them. If this message resonated with you, if you felt something shift as you read these words, then you're ready for this transformation. You're ready to stop being at the mercy of other people's emotions and start mastering your own. Take a moment right now to really feel into what your life would look like if you were emotionally untouchable. Think about waking up tomorrow knowing that nothing anyone says or does can disturb your inner peace. Think about moving through your day from a place of such emotional stability that drama, criticism, and rejection feel like distant noise rather than personal attacks. That version of you, calm, confident, unshakable, isn't some fantasy. It's who you really are when you're not being reactive. It's who you become when you stop seeking yourself in other people and start finding yourself within yourself. The journey to emotional untouchability is the journey home to yourself, and it starts with the decision to stop giving your emotional power away. If this video helped you see yourself or your relationships differently, hit subscribe to continue this journey of emotional mastery. Share in the comments what resonated most with you. What's the first step you're going to take toward becoming emotionally untouchable? And if this message truly touched something deep within you, consider showing your support with a super thanks. It helps create more content like this for people who are ready to stop being emotionally reactive and start being emotionally free. See you in the next one. Thanks for watching.